Hello and welcome to the Despawn Podcast. I am Despawn, also known as Paul. Today we are talking fans and their fandoms. We've got an interesting one today, a fandom I should love but don't really understand. So we've got an expert to come along and join us and explain all the wonderful things in the wonderful world of Kingdom Hearts. I am joined today by the wonderful Arief Johan. How are you doing, Arief?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Paul. This is I love how did you put I was gonna put parentheses in expert. I feel like in your I read that as you were expert in Kingdom Hearts.
No, no. I mean, look at your background. You are a certifiable expert.
Oh no, it's like this all the time.
Yeah, no,
It's
yeah, yeah. This is just your standard background. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, out of the two of us, I think we can definitely say on levels, you are the expert when it comes to Kingdom Hearts. I know you're playing a lot of it at the moment. Recently, it seems to be a regular thing when it comes to your streams and things like that. But before we jump into obviously Kingdom Hearts, for anyone who doesn't know yourself, give them the elevator pitch behind Arif.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so I go online. I go by Arief Johan, which is a very uncreative username. It's just my first name and last name, so it's also easy to remember. But in terms of what I do here on the internet, in terms of content, all that kind of stuff. So I'm a content creator from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. A lot of my content surrounds or revolves around Southeast Asian indie games or indie games that feature Southeast Asian elements. So I work with developers and publishers in Southeast Asia around the world to highlight those games on my Twitch channel and as well as do fun little bits of content on Twitter and Instagram related to that. But also, other than Southeast Asian games and outside of the indie scene, I am a huge fan of Kingdom Hearts. It's my favorite franchise in entertainment of all time. I grew up with it, and it's just one of those things where if I'm not talking about Southeast Asian games, I'm talking about Kingdom Hearts and vice versa. You know what I mean? Even in non-gaming, non-entertainment conversations, you can ask a bunch of my friends or the people that know me. I will slip in a Kingdom Hearts reference here and there, and the people that I get it. You know what I mean? But yeah, just here to that's two things to know about me. That's all you need to know about me and my content creation journey.
Southeast Asian games and Kingdom Hearts. I just imagine
Yeah.
you ordering a coffee. It's like, yeah. So have you heard the story of Roxas?
Yeah. Sometimes there's just like a jingle that plays in the cafe, and you're like, oh man, that really sounds like Roxas's theme. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, nope, I have no
Nope.
idea what you're talking about.
Nope, that's just Mariah Carey. What are you doing?
Yeah. I heard the Christmas world and Nightmare Before Christmas was a great part of this. This Christmas decor. I don't know, trying to pull stuff together. There's a lot of things that relate to Kingdom Hearts. There's a lot of subject matter that's it's a large pool. So not that hard to make references.
So we're going to start with an easy question for you about the
Okay,
world of
hit me.
Kingdom Hearts. In 10 words or less,
me.
explain the entire Kingdom Hearts story.
Kingdom Hearts is where Final Fantasy meets Disney.
Lost count. Perfect. Nailed it.
Kingdom Hearts is all about where Final Fantasy meets Disney, and Kingdom Hearts is really, at the end of the day, the entire story is just about friendship and reconnecting with your friends, old friends, new friends, just friends in general. It's literally about friendship.
Okay.
That's what Kingdom Hearts is about.
Well, slightly more than 10 words, but I'll allow it because it mentioned friendship at least 3 times, and I love it. So, I mean, obviously, the big question is what was it that first introduced you to Kingdom Hearts, and what helped you like fall in love with that series?
Yeah, so it's a really funny story actually. I mean, I tell the story to a lot of my friends because it's kind of also my history with video games. So to give you a little bit of context, right? Like I grew up on the SNES. I think the SNES was my first console that me and my dad played, and then I got my own Game Boy, all that kind of stuff. So I was in that era of gaming, and I remember I can't remember which birthday exactly it was, but one of my birthdays, my dad came home after work. It was like 6 o'clock. He just dropped a giant box on the table and was like, "Happy birthday," right? And I was like, "This is amazing." So I opened the box. It was a PlayStation 2. And I was like, holy crap. And I've had the PlayStation 1 before this. Like I said, I had the Game Boy, all that kind of stuff. But the PlayStation 2 was one of those things where he got it for me for my birthday and a stack of games. And it's actually really funny. I don't know if you've heard this story yet, Paul, but this is something that you might find funny. But on that stack of games, there was like 10 games or so, right? There was like Dark Cloud 2, bunch of other games that I don't really remember right now. Final Fantasy 10 and Kingdom Hearts, right? First thing that I booted up on my PlayStation 2 was Final Fantasy 10. Put it in. I couldn't vibe with it. It was about like a couple not even an hour in or so, right? A couple minutes in.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not my game. Took it out, put in Kingdom Hearts 1, and I never looked back since. So that was kind of my just by chance I got into Kingdom Hearts like that. And then ever since I played almost every single game in the franchise.
I'm still annoyed to this day that you don't play Blitzball. Greatest game of all time.
No, okay. So time out. No joke. No joke. It was the Blitzball that turned me off. For
Fair.
those that are Final Fantasy X, I'm so sorry. I think like child RF could not could not get into Blitzball. It's the first level, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
you gotta.
pretty
I
much.
don't know. Yeah. So I could not do that. I could not do that.
Oh no, I love it, but yeah, I get that. But yeah, no, I understand it's like that childlike wonder of like, I'm assuming for you, well, I'm just putting words in your mouth right now, but like discovering a world of like RPGs with a world of Disney, and that combination of the two has got to be like key to winning over a lot of children.
E being the pun intended there. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think it's like you're totally right. And like I said, for those that don't know Kingdom Hearts, right? Basically what it is that it's the pitch of the game, like I said before, is just it's got Final Fantasy characters, it's got Disney characters, and you're playing as a new set of new characters or their own original characters, jumping from Disney World to Disney World and just solving issues of that world. But for me, you're totally nailing it. As somebody who's also watching a lot of Disney films back in that time as well, the fact that I could go over to see Tarzan, have Tarzan in my party, and then go over to the next world and have in the next game with Mulan or Aladdin or things like that. That's mind blowing to me still to this day. And it's also one of those things where you're totally right. It's all just about it's childlike wonder. It's also just so optimistic. It's so beautiful. It's so heartfelt. It just makes you feel good inside. But also the series is also it's very funny and very ironic because the subject matter of that series gets really crazy and really weird and really dark as well.
Yeah.
So it threads a fine balance, but that's kind of why I love it. It has kind of everything in it,
Yeah, I mean, just going into that, like obviously one of the like the we'll say the memes of Kingdom Hearts is that the story is one of the most convoluted stories in video games. Do you think that's true? Because I mean, I was doing some research looking up on this. Like, obviously, I know about like Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3. There's a couple of the side stories that I know like that came out on, like the Game Boy Advance or I think the PSP and things like that. But looking into the timeline, I think there's like 13 games in the series.
Yeah.
Um,
Are
which
you including the mobile games or not? Because if you do include the mobile,
see, this is as well. Yeah, there's mobile games as well. It's like,
yeah.
how convoluted is the story really? Because on the surface, it looks like it is very much just like you're a Square Enix character going around Disney worlds fighting bad guys, but then you hear stories of like the Heartless and friendship and all of this kind of stuff. Like, how
Yeah.
convoluted does it get? Do you think it's got a good reputation for being sufficiently convoluted, or is it a meme at this point?
I think the memes are 100% justified, right? As much as I joke about it, it's like Kingdom Hearts is really confusing, and
Mhm.
I'd be lying to y'all here if I said that I knew Kingdom Hearts in its entirety, and every single all the background of the characters, what that means, how they all are interlaced with each other. The basic premise of Kingdom Hearts is easy to understand from game to game, right? But there's always moments you can ask any Kingdom Hearts fans or people that have played the series. 100% every single game. I mean, maybe after one, I would say there's always a moment where you hear a piece of dialogue or they introduce a new concept and you're just like, what is going on, right? It's like it's just sort of this. It's like that's awesome, that's cool, but what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
So I think it is really funny because it is indeed very confusing, and the total the memes of pointing how things relate to one another and drawing that whole mind map is very much true. But at the end of the day, it's like I don't think it's not. It's not like I don't know. You're reading a physics textbook, and if you lose one page, you don't know what's going on for the rest of the book. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's not that difficult to understand, but it definitely is convoluted
Yeah. Is
for
it?
sure.
Would you say it's more along the lines of like it depends how much you want to take away from it, or more than it
Yeah,
being like you have to understand everything. So you could just play 1, 2,
yeah.
and 3, run through those, or you could spend all your time understanding all the backstory.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, and those that are looking to play this series for the first time as well, right? I think there are essential games in the series. Like you said, the main series 1, 2, 3.
Hmm.
I would argue Birth by Sleep, which is the PSP one, which is now remastered for a lot of them, is actually also a really important one. But beyond that, to be honest with you, yeah, have fun with the game. If you're looking for the lore, there are as a la typical JRPGs. If you look at the logbooks, there's entries and novels of pages that you can read just for the people that are interested in the backstory, right? And there are, if you're on the Kingdom Hearts Reddit, there's always like, oh, we noticed that the number 7 pops up here, and there's actually 7 people that do this, and there's So there are those things if you're a hardcore fan looking for that. But at the end of the day, look, like the main premise of Kingdom Hearts is that you're going around new worlds, you're meeting new friends, you're helping them with their problems, and you're just trying to reconnect with the people that you know. right?
Hmm.
And that story is just, I think it's very universal. So it's also just one of those things where at the end of the day, it's really just about family and friendship. And that as a concept shouldn't be that hard to grasp from game to game, because that's the core principle throughout each and every Kingdom Hearts title.
So pretty
Which I
pretty
think
universal.
people, yeah. But I think people get blown out. I mean, for sure, I'd be lying to you. Like I said, let me get this. Let me just be clear here, Paul. There is a weapon in the game, in the series of Kingdom Hearts, called the Keyblade,
Hmm.
right? But it's not the Keyblade. It's the letter, like the X letter, which is pronounced key. So when Kingdom Hearts gets weird, wacky, and confusing, it definitely exists. You
Okay.
know what I mean? But that's also why I also, my last thing about the memes is that I also love it, right?
Yeah.
If anything can be memified, it's like, you're just you're, if you're in it for the joke, all the better, all the better.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I mean, obviously, we talked about how you initially discovered the series as a kid, where you got given the game as a present. How did you
Yeah.
go from that to it being like a mainstay of your life? And like, was it one of those things where you just kind of, in fact, I'll let you explain. Like, how did you like?
Yeah.
How did it become like from being a kid finding a new game with Disney characters to it being like a major part of your life now?
Totally. I think, I don't know how other people would answer this, but there is a tonal change between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2, right? Kingdom Hearts 1 is a lot more closed. It makes sense in terms of, like, so the story, the overarching thing. You're meeting all these Disney characters. Oh, Aerith is in this game, Cloud is in this game. That's really cool. You know what I mean? Sephiroth is a boss battle. So there's a bunch of these, like, cool moments in the first Kingdom Hearts game, but it's pretty straightforward. But I would say, because I was playing it on the PS2, a couple years later, Kingdom Hearts 2 dropped as well, and in between that, Chain of Memories for the Game Boy Advance. But I think Kingdom Hearts 2 is the definitive game that I think the creators of Kingdom Hearts were like, no, we're gonna make, like, statements out of this series. It's not gonna be just a bunch of kids fighting with Donald and Goofy in search for King Mickey. There's gonna be a lot more deeper elements that we're gonna introduce, and it's gonna be a full blown JRPG in the way that, the typical JRPG tropes will come out in some way, shape, or form. So if you go back and play Kingdom Hearts 2, it's actually, I think that's what made me stay. You went from, there are mini games in the Little Mermaid world where you're still having fun, you're playing music and all that kind of stuff. But there's also some really, really impactful, meaningful storytelling that's happening in Kingdom Hearts 2 that I get emotional thinking about to this day. And I watched a stream of a friend earlier today. She was playing one of the boss battles, right? And as you hear the music swell in that boss battle, it's just, you just feel the passion and the beauty, and how much the developers put into this game, and that it's not just a boss battle. It's like you're really exploring a relationship between these two characters as well. So there's so much depth to Kingdom Hearts on the story level, but it was on a personal level. So I think that's why I stuck around with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to get to like some more like the mechanics of Kingdom Hearts. So again, like for anyone who's like not played it, they've obviously seen the gameplay. It very much looks like a to me anyway on the outside, because again, weirdly it's a game I've never played. I think I started Kingdom Hearts 1, I got about half an hour in and then just never went back to it for some reason. But it very much looks like a kind of semi-linear open worlds, kind of obviously jumping between the worlds, hack and slash, which is
Yeah.
weird to me when I think of it being like one of a Square Enix game in their heyday of kind of like making those JRPGs. So you like say the modern Final Fantasies and things like that. How would you explain the mechanics to people or who've never played Kingdom Hearts? What kind of game is it
Yeah.
actually?
Yeah. It is a JRPG. I'd say it's an action oriented JRPG. So for sure, I think it's such an interesting time because, at least in my knowledge of Square at that point when they were coming up with PS2 games, I think they were experiencing a little bit more with 3D worlds, obviously, right? Which started with the PS1 era, but with the PS2, I think you could move around more freely in three-dimensional worlds. So I think this is kind of where they took a lot of their experimentation of making just a full-on action oriented game. So I guess with Kingdom Hearts is that, yeah, it is described a little bit more action oriented, where X is to swing your weapon, right? And you can freely move the camera, you can lock onto targets, all that kind of stuff. But the inherent JRPG mechanics are in the game, whereby you have armor, you have different weapons that do different things, you have magic, you have all that kind of stuff. But it is definitely not a turn-based game, which is also what I love, because as somebody who still loves turn-based games and still loves old school Square games, also, I love Pokemon. That's another one of my huge franchises that I love. Like turn-based is awesome, but there was something about Kingdom Hearts back in the day where it just sucks you in so much because you're actively, doing quick time events. You're actively fighting XYZ enemies and whatnot. So I guess that's the general gameplay. The other best part about Kingdom Hearts is that I love how creative they are with their gameplay, mostly because I know a lot of people say they're button mashy, and they can be quite button mashy because you're just going from enemy to enemy. But in my opinion, it's like when you play the harder difficulties of Kingdom Hearts, it becomes worse than a Souls game. You got to know exactly the right frame to block. You got to know the exact frame or segment to heal and whatnot. There's so many different ability combinations. And also, if you're a casual player, if you're looking for fun, like it's summoning Mushu from Mulan or Dumbo to help you out in a battle, like even as somebody who's in their mid-20s, like that's flipping exciting, man. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Tinkerbell coming up on screen, like to help out with this, beating up some heartless, some no-name enemies. Like I love the thrill of that. So I think there's just so much for everybody, right? What's not to like about that kind of combat or that
yeah.
kind of gameplay system?
And again, is it going in kind of like we talked about the story a little bit? Oh, like you can go in base level and just have fun with the friendship level, or you could go in deep and understand all the backstory. The what are they called? The something 13. You can answer this one.
Yeah, the Organization 13.
Organization
Yeah,
13, so you can understand all the backstory
yeah.
of those, that kind of thing. And I'm assuming like the combat kind of has a similar premise where you could just stick it on easy, go in button mash,
Yep.
have fun, running around the worlds, fighting the bad guys that you recognize from all the films. Or like you say, you could bump it up to that like harder difficulty and just get really into like a solid JRPG.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's I think you nailed it. Like I said, I think Kingdom Hearts is indeed very inclusive. I think that's why the fan base is also, you get so many different types of people that play Kingdom Hearts as opposed to, a turn-based JRPG where, look, if you don't like turn-based, you're probably not going to like
Hmm.
that kind of game or something like that, right? But I think for me, yeah, you absolutely nailed it. There's so much depth in combat if you want to get into that, but also you can totally play the game on a slightly easier mode and get past it a little bit. And the boss fights aren't as technical, if you will, as they go down the line. But 100%, if you're looking for that experience, you can. I mean, just look at what I've been streaming Kingdom Hearts 2 for almost a year now, and
Yeah.
I'm playing on the hardest difficulty of that game. And the best thing about that is that even for completionists or people that are looking for that grind, I think the developers of Kingdom Hearts put in a lot of secret bosses, a lot of, you can fight the bosses again with a harder difficulty set, all those kinds of stuff. Iconic bosses from the Disney era, from the Final Fantasy era. So all these kinds of things you can experience. But like you said, if you want to be filthy casual with Kingdom Hearts, you can be. If you want to enjoy, Mickey falling through the air and having some wacky dialogue as you're, I don't know, as you're experiencing the third game, you can totally have that. But I will say that, yeah, the gameplay is, I think, fairly underrated. I think a lot of people crap on the gameplay a little bit because they say it's quite button mashy, but I think I love it. You can make it as creative as you want it to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to test your knowledge a little bit. Not
Okay,
like
let's do it.
we're not doing like a top 10 questions or anything, but like, do you know like I did a little bit of research, but I don't know how much of it is
Okay,
true because, like always, all my research comes from Wikipedia. But
of course.
do you know much about like how this game came to be and like the backstory of how it became a game and a series that now
Yeah.
tons of people love? Like, could you go into a little bit of
Yeah.
that and like explain like some of the backstory of that
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the Kingdom Hearts story about how this came to be is like an infamous story. I think a lot of people know it, even though even people that have never played Kingdom Hearts before. But it's like it's this fabled, how would you say, rumor, right?
Mm.
That Shinji Hashimoto, who is currently still at Square Enix, if I'm not mistaken, producer of the Final Fantasy series, one of the the grandfathers of the Final Fantasy property over there at Square. Square Enix and Disney were working in the same office building in Japan, and by chance, I think they were, Shinji Hashimoto and a producer at Disney were in the elevator one day, had a conversation, struck it up, and that led to a partnership where Disney and Square wanted to make something together, right? So that's kind of the fabled story. I know there's a lot of iterations of, there have been some conversations here and there, but maybe that's what cemented it or whatever have you.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it definitely sounds like it's, why not make use of this opportunity when you have two powerhouses of studios like Disney and Square Soft at the time, just combine and make something like this, right? And I think it's also interesting because I know you're a big Final Fantasy VII fan,
Yes.
and much like the rest of the world, I guess, right? But so it's also beautiful because, so even though Shinji Hashimoto was a producer on Kingdom Hearts and maybe one of the people that incepted or created Kingdom Hearts. Tetsuya Nomura, who a lot of people know now from Kingdom Hearts, but also the person who did a lot of art for Final Fantasy, most notably Final Fantasy VII. Scenario designs, all that kind of stuff. He's the main creator of what you would know as Kingdom Hearts now, right? So that's maybe a little bit of the background, a little bit of the history. I don't know how exactly things came to be XYZ, but I think it was just a perchance thing that led to something beautiful, and nobody is expected, and nobody still expects there to be games where you have Disney and Final Fantasy characters in the same world.
Yeah.
It's a crazy concept back then. It's a crazy concept right now.
That's it. I could not imagine that happening today. It seems like definitely one of those like, well, it's the classic like the quintessential elevator pitch that became obviously. Sorry, my camera's not behaving
I know,
today,
no worries.
so apologies if I keep blurring out. But yeah, it's definitely one of those like quintessential elevator pitches that again I don't think would happen today if it happened. Like, just I think the politics of video games nowadays are a bit beyond the kind of heyday of excitement of video games back then. So it is amazing
Yeah.
that these kind of things can all come together to build like a classic series like this. I don't think we've had anything like this since like maybe the Smash series is the
Yeah.
closest we could ever see that kind of collaboration of like companies together. But yeah, becoming like a series as beloved as like Kingdom Hearts has become, I think is not something we'd ever see again.
It's it's also really funny because as we talk about Disney and this huge entity that Disney has become now, right? I mean, Disney was huge back in the day; they're even
Mhm.
bigger now, right? But it's funny because this is something that I have yet to see a lot of people in the Kingdom Hearts, fandom or community talk about. But in my, I could be fairly wrong about this, but if you actually look at the boss fights as the Kingdom Hearts games progress, you used to physically fight. I mean, like in the game, right? Fight a lot of bosses that were Disney villains,
Mhm.
but they toned that down as the games progress, especially between 1 and 2. So in my opinion, that's also kind of an analysis of like what Disney is comfortable with and their characters and whatnot. So it's just one of those analyses is like, yeah, the fact that they're still producing these games is awesome, but there could definitely be threads where the negotiations between Square and Disney could maybe getting challenging and challenging as the years go by. But just one of those quick observations, right? Because like I said, if you go back to the first Kingdom Hearts, there's a lot of Disney villains that you physically fight, but then
Yeah.
if you go to so on and so forth, there are a lot of these heartless or unversed or nobody characters instead, or original characters that you fight as bosses. But again, at the end of the day, it's still like if you could get to still hang out with Hercules in the next Kingdom Hearts game, like that is still amazing.
Yeah.
That is still it's still mind blowing that happens.
Yeah, that's it. Do you think that is a case of Disney being a bit more protective of their IPs, or do you think it is a case of like maybe Square Enix just want to do something a bit more in world for themselves, or do you think it's maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. There's so much to unpack there, right?
Hmm.
Because well, I think the first thing on Disney, it would also be terrible for me not to bring up. I mean, you just brought up Smash Bros earlier, right? Sora was announced for Smash as the last DLC character a couple
Yeah,
months ago. I know I freaked out. I know I don't
I'm
know how
even
well you freaked out.
even I lost my mind a
Yeah,
little bit. And again, like I say, Smash isn't a series I've touched a lot of. I own it, I
yeah,
play it, I like seeing all the announcements. But seeing Sora in Smash, like the character that I think at this point 90% of the player base wanted, is an amazing feat in itself. And again, it goes into that kind of the relationships that these companies have, and like it's not often you'd ever see anything like that. And so when it actually happens, it's such an exciting moment for
yeah.
fans around the world, I think.
Yeah, and so like you said, a lot of people expected it, but not a lot of people think that these companies could come to an agreement to make that happen, right?
Hmm.
Or to pull it off, especially with Disney. And it's funny because as we follow the Smash conversation, there's two like parts I want to touch on. That is that, yeah, if you look at the stuff that was going on in the background, according to some sources about how hard it was to get Sora into Smash, that's one thing, right? But then the second thing, there's another code that came out around the same time, or I think it existed before, but people were bringing it back up at around the same time. But even the producers of Final Fantasy 14 had mentioned before that they don't really want to do any Kingdom Hearts related DLC or expansions or features within Final Fantasy 14, which is the biggest, arguably one of the biggest games right now.
I'd say so, yeah.
Because they don't want to get into the whole complicated relationship between Square and Disney, even though Kingdom Hearts is a Square property, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just general complications. So I don't really know where we're leading towards, but all I know is that yeah, I can imagine it's super hard to work with Disney to pull these things off, and that's why I keep saying it's a shock that there are still Kingdom Hearts games that are coming out. Um, yeah, so I would say I guess that's the first thing. And then the last thing I'll say on that is that so Tetsuya Nomura, for those that don't know the drama behind or the rumor drama behind Tetsuya Nomura's relationship with Square Enix and whatnot, but there's a lot of people that think that he's definitely trying to have more agency with the Kingdom Hearts series, especially relating to his history with Final Fantasy Versus 13, Final Fantasy 15, and the shenanigans that happened there, and what Kingdom Hearts means to him. And yeah, the past couple of years in the Kingdom Hearts meta, if you will, the upper level, conversation around the game's producers and the back end stuff things has been just super interesting to follow. So I definitely think he's trying to make it his own definitive property, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I know, we're going to go into conspiracy theory moments right now, but
Yeah, please
again,
put the tinfoil hats on.
yeah, tinfoil hats on. So talking about like, obviously the Smash thing, I noticed obviously like
Yeah.
you say how difficult it can be to get these characters to work together. There's a lot of backgrounds in the Kingdom Hearts series where like it's very the stained glass motifs that
Yeah.
they have. I noticed a lot of them didn't feature any Disney characters in the Smash reveals. So again, like say, it's one of those things like where does the kind of the permissions lie and what can be used and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of very indicative of, like you say, of like how difficult it can be for these companies to work together. So like what kind of shortcuts do they take, or kind of workarounds do they take to kind of get around using certain characters. But yeah, I find all that stuff very interesting. I'm very much a kind
Yeah.
of guy who like reads the dirt sheets and so like, well, this guy talked to this guy, or this guy liked this tweet, and does this mean
Yep.
this or that? It's like, so seeing these things happen in like real time and like in these announcements is quite cool. But yeah, just want to get into kind of like more of the kind of like the in depth on the story elements and stuff. We're probably gonna get
Mhm.
slight spoiler stuff now, so if you're worried about spoilers for Kingdom Hearts, just skip ahead. Maybe I'll put a time code in somewhere. But yeah, so like obviously we'll stick to like the first one because that's kind of where I'm coming in at the moment, and probably a lot of new
Yep.
people are. Like, how would you like? Obviously, we've talked about like the basics of like the friendship, meeting these characters, moving around these worlds. What is kind of like the actual like deep down premise of the story, and like what kind of
Mhm.
like how do these interactions get told, and like how are they explained in the worlds? If you want to go into a little
Yeah.
bit on that.
Yeah. And I think everything starts with Kingdom Hearts 1, as obviously it
Hmm.
will, right? But there are, the series goes through time jumps, the series follows different characters throughout. But I guess the premise of, or the main story of Kingdom Hearts 1 is that you got your trio, Sora, Kairi, and Riku, right? Who all live on Destiny Island. Everything is great. They're I don't know, exploring relationships or friendships and they're just being kids, right?
Hmm.
They're just being kids. So, but then one day, their world gets engulfed by darkness, and the three of them get separated throughout the universe, if you will, all thrown into different worlds. And Sora's journey happens. He happens to come across Donald and Goofy. And their whole shtick is that they're in pursuit of their friend King Mickey, who has gone missing recently. So the reason why Sora, Donald, and Goofy band together is because Sora is looking for his friends, when Donald and Goofy are looking for his friend or King
Hmm.
Mickey, right, or their friend King Mickey. So that's where Sora's journey ends up. They're all just in a pursuit of finding their friends. And then with Kairi and Riku, who are maybe slightly off the main story, you kind of see Kairi here and there, but with Riku especially, I think instead of finding friendships like Donald and Goofy, he finds a little bit more of the bad crew with Maleficent and the more villainous characters in the Disney universe. And then as for the story as it goes, like I said, we jump through Disney World to Disney World, but the whole objective is that they're supposed to close the keyhole to every Disney world or every world that they encounter to make sure that those worlds don't end up like their island in the past as well. So it's really just it's a story about making sure that all the worlds that they jump to are safe,
Hmm.
whilst being a pursuit to find their friends. And you'll find out that Sora is destined because he has the power of the Keyblade, a weapon that chooses a person that's strong of heart and nobody else can wield. And that has its own implications as well. And so as the story progresses, I mean, obviously we get to a point where yes, we're saving a bunch of worlds, but there is how would you say, a larger plan behind the scenes, right? Of why these worlds are getting engulfed by darkness. And, maybe Maleficent isn't the one pulling the strings at the end of the day. So I guess that's the fairly spoilery version of it, right?
Okay.
And then there's obviously a little bit more that happens at the end sequence of Kingdom Hearts. But that's kind of where Kingdom Hearts 1 starts off, really, at the end of the day.
Okay. That sounds
Yeah.
good. Like, a really cool premise, like a really interesting way to introduce the worlds. So talk about the key. Like, obviously, the Keyblade is the big iconic part of the series. It's like
Yeah.
it's the main weapon. Like, explain the Keyblade, because on paper it looked like a really dumb idea.
Yeah.
It's just a giant key with a handle that you hit things with.
Yep.
Like, just going a little bit on that, because I need some kind of like
Yeah.
premise going into this game. Like, because yeah, on paper it looks it's a wild idea.
It is it is the perfect metaphor for Kingdom Hearts, where
Hmm.
these are concepts that should not work together, but they do,
Yeah.
right? And the Keyblade is perfectly representative of it. And the Keyblade actually relates to the more also spoilery version of what Kingdom Hearts is as a whole, right? So yeah, basically the Keyblade is just a weapon. It's a key that you can hit people with, and it's very strong. Like,
Perfect.
cool, that's awesome, right?
Nailed it.
Sure, why
Big
not?
ass-
It's a yeah, it's a friendlier version of it's a kid version of the Buster Sword, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But I think the thing with the Keyblade is that in the first game, Sora is the only one that is able to wield the Keyblade, right? And you're seeing that, yes, he's the one that has the power to close these worlds and make sure they're safe. There's the Heartless are attracted to the Keyblade because it seems like a very powerful weapon or entity or whatever. But then you start to see that, hey, King Mickey has a Keyblade, and maybe there are other people in the worlds that have Keyblades, right? So maybe it's not just Sora that wields these weapons, right? And so I guess I'm not entirely sure about the actual history of the Keyblade itself, but once you get through the games, every couple of games or so over the past 10, 15 years or whatever have you, right? You start to actually realize that there was a huge event in the past that was called the Keyblade Wars, where everybody or there was a group of people, a large group of people that were Keyblade wielders that were actually trying to harness the power of Kingdom Hearts, right? And you might be asking me, RF, what the heck is Kingdom Hearts? It's in every game title. I don't know what the heck it is. And let me tell you, I barely understand what Kingdom Hearts is, like the actual Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, it's like, so Kingdom Hearts is a place that contains all hearts, and it's supposed to give whoever can control it all power and knowledge of the universe, right? So as with a lot of these stories, it's really just the pursuit of power and knowledge. And those that wield the Keyblade, actually they want to like I said before, there's a weapon called the Keyblade with
Hmm.
the little X, that whoever wields that gets the power of Kingdom Hearts. So throughout the series, you realize that there's a lot of the villains that actually want to obtain the power of Kingdom Hearts, and this is a thing that's not been happening in Sora's time, but also in a bunch of other times forward and backwards and whatever have you. So I guess that's the significance of the Keyblade. Like, there's a bunch to it. There's a lot of history. How much did you follow there, Paul? How much of that was like was permeated through you and probably like every other listener of the show right now?
I recognize the word Keyblade. Cool. No, it kind of makes sense. Like,
I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
there's that thing in the middle that kind of like it's like you say, it starts off again. We were talking about it near the beginning, like how it can be the Kingdom Hearts series could be quite simple, and then it can get quite convoluted and taking what you want from it. It could be, yeah, like it does feel like it's that kind of. And I think the Squaresoft at the time, or Square Enix, have been really good at building those kind of worlds where if you want to take as little or as much as you want from it, it's perfect. And it does seem like that kind of story where it's like you could just be, yeah, it's a Keyblade, it's a big key, you hit people with it, it's great. Or it could be like there's a whole overarching backstory about like how these Keyblades came to be or what they're used for. And the importance of them, and like you can go deep dive, you could go through the wiki articles, you could do the Reddits if you want, and yeah, read the logbooks in the game and stuff like that. And it does feel like it is that kind of, it's that quintessential again, like classic Square Enix, how they managed to build like an entire like sub story into their worlds that you can follow, and I think it's testament to how good Square are or were at the time on building their worlds, and yeah, I think that's kind of like that's what I'm taking away from it at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, just to connect this on a bigger picture, right? Especially for those that love Square Enix, those that love Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, maybe, or maybe just JRPGs in general. I think a lot of the subject matter in Final Fantasy and or Square games revolve around identity, right? So I know we're talking about the Keyblade, I know we're talking about Disney and Final Fantasy and these kinds of worlds or whatever. But like I said, when I say Kingdom Hearts is about friendship, it's also about identity, right? And who you are according, are you the reflection of the people around you? What do those people mean to you? Who are you? You know what I mean? The exploration of oneself. So if you actually look at Kingdom Hearts, my favorite thing about it isn't just the Disney world, isn't just the weapons, isn't just this whole backstory. Almost every single character has some really deep character arcs that they go through, whether they be a villain, whether they be, a protagonist, or whether they be a small part of the story in one game and a larger part of the other game, or vice versa. There's so much meaning behind identity, and what does it mean to exist? How is one happy with oneself and the people around them? And to me, that's, some of my favorite stories in Final Fantasy is around. I mean, look at, like I said, we bring up Final Fantasy VII. It's like very, very similar, right?
Hmm.
According to Cloud and Sephiroth, and even just the concept of what Shinra is doing. And then even if you look at the quintessential, example with Final Fantasy IX and Vivi, right? A lot of people's main takeaway from Final Fantasy IX is Vivi's whole shtick about being existing,
Hmm.
right? From whatever tribe or clan or background Vivi is from. So that's what I love about JRPGs, I guess, but also just Square in general, where there's so much surface level stuff, but when you get down to the core aspects of Kingdom Hearts and all the kind of, it's just around characters, it's around people, and it's around relationships and friendships, right? And that emotional element is something that I think the reason why the fandom is always so attached to this series, I think, is because you don't connect to it just because of how cool the Keyblades are, or that you can fight with Simba from The Lion King or whatever, right? It's really about like, wow, when I hear the Roxas music, I'm gonna bawl my eyes out right now. You know what I mean? If I hear the Twilight Town jingle in the beginning, it's like I can see the sunset. I know exactly, I'm in a time and place, and I know exactly um that there's so much deep sad background, with this. So yeah, just some things to pull out there for those that are maybe interested in overarching themes between Square Enix and JRPGs and Final Fantasy and whatnot there.
Yeah, I think is it one of would you say it's safe to say they've done a really good job of building those kind of like connections in the worlds that they build? So we're going back onto it briefly. Like you were talking about like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy VII. Obviously, I'm a huge fan. Like you said, the character arc of Cloud alone,
Mhm.
and dealing with his kind of like the trauma that he's had to go through, and how that affects his character. And then yeah, so you have a in some ways it can be a very visceral connection to Cloud, and then on the outskirts of that, seeing how that affects like people like Aerith and Tifa. And I
Yeah.
think yeah, so like you say, Square have got a really good at building those kind of connections, so you can actually feel how the characters are feeling, and those moments when they're deeply affected in something in the game,
Yeah.
you obviously have that connection to it. And I think obviously
I guess.
linking that into
Yeah.
like Disney characters maybe is kind of like obviously a childhood connection that you had from just loving those characters to then building on top of that the Square Enix connection as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's I'm probably speaking
No,
for you,
that's
but like yeah.
beautiful. That's you're totally nailing it, because I have argued for so many years that Sora is the worst character in Kingdom Hearts, right? Because for those that again haven't played it, that have seen it, Sora is just this like go to, everything's good, everything's happy. He might have a breakdown every once in a while when he can't find his friends, and like it is pretty sad. But
Mhm.
Sora is just like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll help these people. Let's make friends, and like, oh, like group hug or whatever, right? So, but Sora is very much a Disney character. So when like when Ariel wants to be above the water, he's like, let's flip and do it. Let's go. Or if when Hercules is trying to fend off and save Phil or Meg or whatever have you, like Sora's there for him, right?
Mhm.
So there's total parallels in terms of it is also very much a Disney property in the way that Sora in particular operates, which is why he's such a good fit with Donald and Goofy, right? But also on top of that, yeah, there's just so much more. I'll just tell you a quick story, right? The Kingdom Hearts music is a huge thing, and props to Yoko Shimomura, right, who's done a lot of scores here and there. The Kingdom Hearts music is awesome. I was at a concert a couple years back for the Kingdom Hearts Orchestra, right? And when I think on this note about feeling connected to these characters and their journeys and their optimism and just the beauty of these stories, the first 10 minutes of the Kingdom Hearts Orchestra concert, you could hear at least like 10 people crying. Like, not like, just small tears, where you hear people like, you
Full on
know?
balling, yeah,
Yeah. And like I was looking around and I was like, holy crap. I mean, I'm a huge fan and I was feeling very emotional as
yeah.
well,
Hmm.
hearing a lot of the music and the visuals of the Disney worlds and the Kingdom Hearts worlds. But that just speaks to how much that these characters and these stories have impacted people, where you could hear people bawling their eyes out at a Kingdom Hearts concert, right? So I just wanted to mention that because that was such a weird, surreal experience when it comes to deeply connecting with characters from this video game. And it's something that like people who love Kingdom Hearts, there's a reason why the Sora reaction compilation videos on Smash are like people are like breaking down in tears, or
Hmm.
and I was definitely one of them. Like but things like that. So yeah, I think it all connects together, and it's it's why we cry at Disney movies sometimes as well. It's like it just has that Disney magic to this weird JRPG property.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like to boil it down, it's that Disney magic mixed with Square Enix destroying your heart.
Yes.
This is the perfect combination just to get its hooks into you. I mean, I guess that's pretty much
Yeah.
all the story stuff. Like, I mean, what would you say to people that are new to the series? Like, what's the best way for them to jump in to the series?
Yeah. I don't get overwhelmed. I think the thing that I get so frustrated by is that like, oh, people don't want to play Kingdom Hearts because it's so campy. It's too convoluted. It's too complicated, or maybe they don't vibe with the gameplay or whatever. Right? I think it's like people just don't give it enough of a chance because I know some games are very nostalgia filled, right? And this is very much true, especially if you don't connect with the Disney properties of each game or whatever have you. But for me, it's like give Kingdom Hearts a chance. There's obviously the core games, and there's a lot of similarities between the games, but there are some people who also like different titles more than others. So try them out. Start with one. I think two is a lot of people's favorites because it's kind of like the greatest hits even in the from future games. But it's just such a beautiful world to be immersed in. And if you're looking for a game that's not going to frustrate you if you're not playing on hard difficulty settings, it's really just about having a good time experiencing a really really good story and something for you can genuinely make connections with a lot of these characters. So don't be afraid. Please like, jump in because I hate the fandom is crazy. Kingdom Hearts fans are toxic, and like they gatekeep everything or you won't understand it, all that kind of stuff. It's like no, you'll have your own experience with Kingdom Hearts and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think. Well, I've got all that to look forward to because, like we said
I know
earlier,
you do.
you and the community have managed to get us to play Kingdom Hearts 1 on the stream. So
Yeah.
I'm after speaking about it more, I'm quite excited to jump in and discover the world. Because for me, like, on my personal experience, like I say, I've played about half an hour of the first one. But it
Yeah.
should be a series that I love because, again, I grew up watching all those classic Disney films. We've talked about it a few times now. My love for like classic SquareSoft games is second to none. It's like my favorite genre is a good Square JRPG. So it's like it seems like the best of both worlds. But again, I think for me as well, it was kind of like it was very daunting coming into a series late. But I missed it when
Yeah.
it first came around. So I think I started hearing about like Kingdom Hearts around the time that just after 2 had dropped. And at that point, I mean, I'm just like I've got it to the side here.
Yep.
There's probably about 6 games before Kingdom Hearts 2 dropped. So hearing about that is very much kind of like in the story like line aspect is like, yeah, there's about 6 games you're gonna play through first to understand Kingdom Hearts. Like, I'm no, I'm good, I'm fine. But like, yeah, speaking to you,
That's like Kingdom Hearts 3 for sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
if you go to Kingdom Hearts 3, there's for sure a lot of games in
Yeah,
between. Like I said, just talk to somebody who's played Kingdom Hearts before, they can walk you through it. But
yeah.
I've played all of them, and all of them are very most of them, I should say, most of them. But yeah, you just take away what you can from all of them, and just look up a YouTube video. You know what I mean? Look
Yeah.
up an hour long,
Just,
just to
just,
see
just
that
watch a
kind of thing.
story, a story
Yeah,
breakdown. That'll do you. But yeah,
but
like,
I guess
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead. I think just on my note is that I also just wanted to notice the macro trends of Kingdom Hearts as well, right? Like, there's still so many people that are getting into the series,
Mhm.
and I would argue there's also a resurgence over the past 2-3 years because they've started to remaster and re-release a lot of the titles, right? So even the some of these like 358 over 2 days, you can't play that game on the modern consoles, but you can watch all the cutscenes. So things like that, they've made it super accessible for people to jump in. Because I remember back in the day, the reasons why I have so many of these Kingdom Hearts things, you couldn't understand Birth by Sleep if you didn't have a PSP at the time, And I
Mhm.
rented I like borrowed my friend's PSP for that. Or you wouldn't get this story. A lot of people that I knew didn't get this story because they didn't have a DS. They didn't want to play it on a DS or things like that. But now it's so accessible, and I see on Twitter so many more and more people that are jumping on to Kingdom Hearts. So it's also just yeah, you can play them. You can play them right now, and experience it whilst you can all in one spot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, going into the future of the series, do you think we're going to get more Kingdom
Mhm.
Hearts games? Because I know, like,
Oh,
between
such a good question.
because obviously between 2 and 3, I think it was a 14-year wait, a 14 or 15-year wait. Obviously, we had
Yeah.
games in between then, but do you think? Because just again, reading up, doing my in-depth analysis on the series from Wikipedia,
Yeah.
there's obviously I think this was basically the end of this saga that started in Kingdom Hearts 1.
Yeah.
Do you, like, without getting too far into spoiler territory, do you think there's an avenue that these games could continue, or do you think this is the end of the series? What do you think the future holds for Kingdom Hearts?
Yeah, the end of the Dark Seeker saga, or I might have butchered that a little bit. Yeah, the Xehanort era of Kingdom Hearts? I think it's such a fascinating question. I think before that, really quickly, I know you said there is a gap between Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3. That is very much correct.
Mhm.
Also, there was a gap between when they first announced Kingdom Hearts 3 and the actual release of Kingdom Hearts 3. And I'll tell you that quick story where I remember the exact time and place and the exact scenario when I was watching that E3 reveal of Kingdom Hearts 3. And I was watching in the middle of my English class, I'm not gonna lie to you,
Just
and
like,
I flipped out, right? I flipped. It was cool because like everybody was on YouTube. It was like the last day of the school year. It was like,
okay.
oh, summer's around the corner. It's super chill. But I remember flipping out. Little did I know that I had to wait another 5+ years for the game to come out.
Yeah.
But so yeah, this whole series is indeed is very long form. But Kingdom Hearts 3 was always kind of like the holy grail of like once they do 3, it's like that's it, right? But then 3 did come out and it's like what is the future for Kingdom Hearts? I will say that so without getting into spoilers, there is, especially if you play the DLC for Kingdom Hearts 3, Kingdom Hearts is going into a direction that is a little bit unprecedented and there's a lot of variables that are up in the air, right? Where it seems as though the formulaic element of Kingdom Hearts might be going away or it might be altered. And this could be for those that are in the know, maybe it could be a thing with Disney where maybe they're not going to feature Disney worlds in the future or maybe less Disney worlds or what that looks like. But also what Tetsuya Nomura seems like what he's doing with the game. It seems like he has some weird different plans for Kingdom Hearts in this next phase of Kingdom Hearts, right? As for the games that are coming out, I mean, I know we're looking forward to the oh my god, it's killing me. I don't remember what anniversary it is next year for Kingdom Hearts, right? But it's a huge anniversary for Kingdom Hearts next year, and we're promised to get content, and we know we're gonna get content, but we don't know what that looks like. I have no idea. I have no idea. Like it's just crazy to think Kingdom Hearts 3 came out and
Mhm.
you had Pixar worlds which were awesome, but then I think a lot of people have been talking about like, will Kingdom Hearts work with since now Disney has Marvel and Star Wars, are those worlds going to be a part of them now? And what does that look like? Or are Kingdom Hearts going to explore other areas, like I said, that are non-spoilery for now, but knock on wood will be in the future? Yeah, there's just so much potential direction, but to be honest with you, I have no flipping clue. I have no flipping clue about what's the future of Kingdom Hearts.
Would you want a Keyblade that's a lightsaber?
Okay, here's the nerdy RF. Let's put on the hat. If you look at Kingdom Hearts 2, we already had a couple weapons that were very lightsaber-esque, all
Right.
right? So I'm not gonna say they're impossible. Um, I just think it'd be really weird. Like, especially I think lightsabers are, sure, it'd be cool. I'll take that. But just think about the Marvel worlds as well. Like that's a
Yeah.
lightsaber is a blade at the very least. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, wield Captain America's shield or something. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I've just got like for me, because whenever I talk about these things, I always kind of like build the ideal scenario, and I think obviously we talked about like there's hidden bosses and stuff. Darth
Yep.
Vader is a hidden boss in Kingdom Hearts 4.
Yeah, that'd be cool as hell.
That would be
That'd be cool
cool.
as hell.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
amazing. But yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of covers it. Like, obviously, we've talked about like why you
Yep.
love the series, how you discovered the series, kind of like some of the in-depth analysis on the series itself. I mean, like, what would be our biggest takeaway? Like, just to wrap this up, like,
Yeah.
on the series itself, what is it that, like, in essence, that you want people to take away, and that you want to like understand why you love this series, and yeah, and go forwards, like, why it's a series that people should check out.
Yeah. There's actually I've been thinking about this a lot as I do because I'm a flipping Kingdom Hearts nerd, right? But I always used to tell people that the reason why I love Kingdom Hearts is that Kingdom Hearts also informed my moral compass as a kid, right? Because for me, it's like I think there's a beautiful quote from Jeff Johns, who is at DC, a lot of part of the creative vision at DC, but he said that comic books allow people to be better people, and that informs their moral compasses. I think for me, it was obviously comics. I'm a big nerd, but Kingdom Hearts was that for me, where genuinely in the Kingdom Hearts story, there's so much optimism, there's so much real, meaningful conversations around how you should be or how important family or friends are, or being how important being a good person is as well, right? So that's one thing to mention on Kingdom Hearts, where despite all its convolutedness, despite all the jokes and the memes and the campiness of everything, it makes you feel genuinely good right? It's happy, it's optimistic, it's beautiful. And I think the rest of it is that what's not to love when you're talking about just the magic of Disney and going around to Disney worlds and whatnot and experiencing that. So all of that, beautiful aspect is why I love this series. But also, it's some of my favorite gameplay of all time. Like I love the combat. I love grinding Kingdom Hearts. I love equipping new Keyblades, equipping new weapons. So for a person that is traditionally looking for a good gameplay, experience as well, there is a lot to it. So Kingdom Hearts is just one of the most beautiful things ever, and there's a collective experience when people say like, "Wow, I do shed a tear every single time I hear that theme," right? Or X is my favorite character, Y is my favorite character because I know what they went through, right? Or oh, this scene when these characters meet, that means so much to me, you know? So that communal experience is what I love about the fandom because everybody's pretty much on the same page when it comes to the emotions that we all feel, and there's nothing more beautiful than that, in my opinion, whether it be through games or whatever media, right? It really just connects people together in some weird, metaphorical, joking way. The friends that you are making on screen also relate to the friends that I've made in real life. So it's such a beautiful, beautiful full circle for me.
So what you're saying is the real Kingdom Hearts is the friends we made along the way.
And it's not a joke. And it's not a joke. 0% of that statement is a joke, Paul. You know what
Amazing,
I mean? Those that
amazing.
play Kingdom Hearts know exactly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ara, for joining me today. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, people can find me at Arief Johan, ARIEF JOHAN. I'm on Instagram, on Twitter mostly. I love Twitter. Please just, I throw a lot of junk out there, but it's my favorite medium. I also stream a lot on Twitch. Like I said, currently stream Kingdom Hearts right now, but I also love Southeast Asian games. So other than this whole nerdiness about Kingdom Hearts, because I'm from Malaysia, and because I love entertainment and video games, I really want to have other people play amazing games as well that some may or may not include some Kingdom Hearts references, as you know. But yeah, just Twitch, RF Johan, Twitter, RF Johan, all that kind of good stuff. I'd love to see you all there.
Well, thank you for joining me again today, mate. And everyone out there, thank you for watching. Remember, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.